Welcome everyone, join us today as we uncover the life and legacy of Paul Carrack, the Sheffield musician whose voice shaped classics for Ace, Squeeze, and Mike and the Mechanics, across more than 5 decades. So let's dive in. Paul Melvin Carrack, born the 22nd of April 1951, in Sheffield, England. Growing up in the Crooks area of Sheffield, Paul's father worked as a painter and decorator, and his mother helped run the family paint shop. The family lived in basic conditions at the back of the shop, with no central heating, an outside toilet, a tin bath, and a small kitchenette. When Paul was about 11, his father died in a work accident, leaving his mother and the children to keep things going. His older brother John took over the business at just 15, and stayed there until his own retirement. The family remained rooted in Sheffield, with one of their local neighbours, only a couple of streets away, being future star Joe Cocker. At school, music was not presented as a serious career path. Like many boys in industrial Yorkshire at the time, Paul was shown what local good jobs looked like. A school careers officer took his class on a visit to a coal mine, travelling with them down in the cage and walking them to the coal face. The experience of the noise, dust and cramped conditions underground made a strong impression on him, and helped push him firmly toward the idea that he needed to find another way to make a living. Paul began playing music as a teenager, starting on a homemade drum kit in the attic, and experimenting with his brother's guitar. In his mid-teens, he taught himself organ, so he could join local soul and R&B bands, and by about 17 he was already playing regularly in groups. Before long he would leave school to concentrate on music full-time. He briefly tried a conventional job, when a friend of his brother's arranged work for him at the gas board, but he only stayed about 6 weeks before returning to band life. In 1973, just before his big break, he took another job at a Jaguar car dealership, valeting cars that had been serviced. At that time his girlfriend Kathy, who later became his wife, was working as a lab technician and effectively supporting them while he kept his musical ambitions alive. In his late teens he spent time working in Germany, playing in club bands in Frankfurt and Cologne, and then at the Top 10 Club on Hamburg's Reeperbahn, a venue famously used by the Beatles a decade earlier. Those long nights and hard schedules gave him valuable experience as a working musician, before anyone outside the club circuit knew his name. Paul's first significant professional band was the jazz rock group Warm Dust. He joined the group as keyboard player and vocalist, touring and recording with them while still young. Warm Dust released 3 albums before splitting in 1972. The band never broke into the mainstream, but it gave him his first taste of serious recording sessions, album work and life on the road. After Warm Dust ended, Paul and bassist Terry Comer formed the pub rock band, Ace, in 1972. They built a following on the British pub rock circuit, at a time when that scene was an important stepping stone for many bands. In 1974 they recorded How Long, written and sung by Paul. Although the song was often thought to be about infidelity, Paul actually wrote the song after discovering that bassist Terry Comer had been secretly playing with the Sutherland Brothers and Quiver. It eventually became a major international hit, reaching the UK Top 20, and climbing to number 3 on the US Billboard Hot 100. How Long gave Ace and Paul their first real taste of success. It also established him as a lead singer and songwriter, whose work could travel far beyond the club and pub circuit. The band released albums and toured, but none of the later singles matched the impact of How Long, and by 1977 Ace had disbanded. The song, however, remained a radio staple and has continued to be associated with him ever since. After Ace, Paul moved into a new phase of his career, working both as a band member and as a session musician. He played with Frankie Miller's band, and then joined Roxy Music, contributing keyboards to their albums Manifesto, in 1979, and Flesh and Blood, in 1980. This period placed him in the middle of the late 1970s British rock and art rock world, giving him a higher profile inside the industry, and more experience in large-scale touring and recording. Throughout these years he built a reputation as a dependable session and touring player. He appeared, either live or in the studio, with artists such as Roxy Music, The Pretenders, B.B. King, The Smiths, and others, switching between keyboards and backing vocals as needed. This versatility would become one of the constants in his working life. Paul's first solo albums arrived at the turn of the 1980s. His debut solo record, Nightbird, was released in July 1980, on Vertigo Records. It used several of his Roxy Music connections in the studio, and included the single, Beauty's Only Skin Deep. Nightbird did not produce a major hit, but it marked his move toward establishing a parallel career under his own name. In 1982 he released Suburban Voodoo, produced by Nick Lowe, and recorded at Rockfield Studios in Wales. This album brought his first solo chart success. The single, I Need You, reached number 37 on the US pop chart, and also charted in Australia, the Netherlands and on US rock and adult contemporary lists. During this time he also worked as a member of Nick Lowe and his cowboy outfit, playing keyboards and singing, which further tied him into the British roots rock and pub rock network. In 1981, in between his solo work, Paul joined Squeeze, replacing Jools Holland on keyboards. He played on the band's album East Side Story, and sang lead on Tempted, which became one of Squeeze's best-known songs and remains a staple of classic rock and pop radio. His time in the group was relatively short, but that single added another widely recognized track to his catalogue of vocals. The next major chapter began in 1985, when Genesis guitarist Mike Rutherford formed Mike and the Mechanics, recruiting Paul as one of the lead vocalists alongside Paul Young of Sad Cafe. With this group, he sang lead on several major international hits. In 1985 he was the lead voice on Silent Running, which became a hit on both sides of the Atlantic, and was used in the film On Dangerous Ground. In 1988 he sang The Living Years, a song about loss, regret and communication between generations. The Living Years reached number 1 in the United States and number 2 in the UK, becoming one of the most recognizable singles of the late 1980s. In 1995 he sang lead on Over My Shoulder, another successful single for the band that enjoyed heavy radio rotation and television play. Paul's association with Mike and the Mechanics ran in parallel with his solo work. He shared lead vocal duties with Paul Young until Young's death from a heart attack in 2000. After that, Paul became the group's sole lead singer, continuing in that role until he left the band in 2004. Along the way he also co-wrote some of the group's material with Mike Rutherford, adding another layer to his involvement. While Mike and the Mechanics were active, Paul continued to release solo albums. In October 1987 he issued One Good Reason, on Chrysalis Records. The album produced several noteworthy singles. Don't Shed a Tear reached number 9 on the US Billboard Hot 100, and number 5 on the US mainstream rock chart. The title track, One Good Reason, reached number 28 in the US, and his version of When You Walk in the Room also charted. The album itself reached number 67 in the US and number 46 in Australia. He followed it with Groove Approved, in 1989, which included Battlefield, later reworked as I Live on a Battlefield, and recorded again by Paul and covered by other artists. By the end of the 1980s he had built up a substantial body of work, one hit with Ace, a classic track with Squeeze, major international hits with Mike and the Mechanics, and several charting solo singles. In the 1990s, his solo releases continued, while he remained in demand for collaborations. In 1987 he had already worked with Roger Waters on the album Radio KAOS, and in July 1990 he appeared at The Wall, live in Berlin, singing Hey You, and contributing vocals to The Tide is Turning, in front of a very large open-air audience. In 1993 he joined the short-lived project Spin 1-2 with Tony Levin, Steve Ferrone, Phil Palmer and producer Rupert Hine. During the decade he also played or sang on recordings or tours with artists such as Elton John, Eric Clapton, The Eagles, The Pretenders and Madness, while continuing to release his own albums. Blue Views, released in 1995, achieved silver sales in the UK, and gold status in Spain. It was followed by Beautiful World, in 1997. This period showed him maintaining a consistent presence as both a frontman and a valued collaborator. Around 2000, Paul took a significant step toward independence by establishing his own label, Carrack UK. His album Satisfy My Soul, released in 2000, came out on that imprint. On this record he played most of the instruments himself, and included songs co-written with Mike Rutherford and Chris Difford of Squeeze. From then on, much of his work came through his own label. He released Groovin' in 2001, mostly comprising covers, and a reissue titled Still Groovin' in 2002 with additional tracks. This was followed by It Ain't Over in 2003 and further reissues of earlier albums. In 2010 he released A Different Hat, recorded with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. That album contained orchestral versions of standards and several of his own songs, including Eyes of Blue, Love Will Keep Us Alive, and It Ain't Over. In 2012 he released Good Feeling, which reached number 46 on the UK albums chart. In 2016 he followed with Soul Shadows, recorded largely with his regular touring band. This album reached number 25 in the UK, and became his highest charting solo album. These Days arrived in 2018, again through Carrack UK, and he supported it with extensive UK touring. In 2021 he released One on One, much of it written, played and produced by Paul himself, during the COVID lockdown period in his own studio. In 2020 he marked 2 decades of independent work, with the release of Live 2000 to 2020, The Independent Years, a multi-disc live anthology drawing from his concerts over that period. In the late 2010s and early 2020s, Paul began a series of recordings with Germany's SWR Big Band. Together they released albums featuring big band arrangements of songs from Paul's catalogue and other material. On a personal note, away from the stage and studio, Paul has kept his personal life relatively private, but has shared some basic details. He married Kathy, his longtime partner from the Ace era, and the couple have 4 children. One of their sons, Jack, plays drums in Paul's touring band, appearing on stage and on some recordings. For many years the family home has been a Grade 2 listed 5-bedroom house in Hertfordshire, near the Buckinghamshire border. A separate garage on the property has been converted into Paul's recording studio, where he has made a significant amount of his later work. Currently, Paul still remains an active recording and touring musician. He continues to release albums through Carrack UK, including his ongoing studio work, and collaborations with the SWR Big Band. In 2024 he issued How Long Has This Been Going On? Greatest Hits, a compilation marking his 50 years as a working musician, and accompanied by an anniversary tour across the UK. In interviews he has spoken casually about retirement plans in the distant future, but for now he continues to work steadily both on the road, and in the home studio. In July 2025, he released The Countryside of Paul Carrack Volume 1, his first venture into country music, and a noticeable stylistic shift in his catalogue. To support the album, he will undertake a UK and Netherlands tour, in April and May 2026, once again celebrating his half-century in music. Alongside this, he has continued to stay active with smaller creative projects, including a limited edition vinyl release, tied to his growing catalogue of independent work. And there you have it. From his Sheffield beginnings, to stages around the world, Paul Carrack has become the unmistakable voice behind some of the most enduring songs of the past 50 years, building a catalogue that audiences everywhere continue to cherish to this very day. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos just like this. Take care and bye for now.